Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Maria Elena, Yesenia, and all of the sisters for inviting me to join you today on, I think, this very important topic. I just want to start off by saying that, when we talk about the issues related to immigration, I think it can be a very heated political conversation. But I think when we come from a perspective of faith and as people of faith, it's really a humanitarian issue. That's how I've seen it. That's how I've always seen my work. It's very much my ministry in every place that I've worked, whether it's Catholic Charities Public Law Center or now at U.S. Immigration Law Group. We first and foremost are concerned with the most vulnerable immigrants in our midst, our brothers and sisters from around the world. So I want to just kind of mention maybe some of the issues, the injustices, but I don't want to just highlight what's wrong, right? We can talk a lot about what's wrong in different aspects of our country and policies and laws, et cetera, but also opportunities, right? In terms of there are ways in which we can make the injustices just, in which we can be a better people in welcoming our brothers and our sisters in this country and how we treat them. So the first probably and perhaps the greatest injustices that we see today in immigration law is with those that are incarcerated, that they're detained not because they've committed any crime, but there is a huge criminalization of the immigrant. Now that our borders are perceived to be more open, and I just say perceived because they're not necessarily, but where we're not having those encampments in Mexico, there are obviously more people coming to the United States and being detained. So detention, apprehensions are significantly up, especially post-pandemic. ICE is now apprehending and detaining people, once again. And we have this a little bit of a push-pull within our own border in that, places like California that really want to see no detention facilities in our state, which with good intentions, right? I think the point is that we don't want to see human beings be incarcerated for no good reason. They're not a danger to society necessarily. They've committed no crimes, that there are other ways in which we can ensure their participation in the legal process and the legal system than keeping them incarcerated. And with that intention in mind, we've basically closed a lot of our facilities. And what's that resulted in is individuals being sent beyond California. So most of the detainees in California are now being shipped to El Paso, which is resulting in significant overcrowding, the increase of COVID and the spreading of COVID, the closing of the courts, the inability for both the deportation officers and the courts to process these individuals in a timely basis. So for example, I have two clients in El Paso, and we proactively filed a motion for a hearing, the fastest and the soonest that the person could actually get a hearing for a bond, which would allow them to pay money to be released, was going to be a whole month later. If we had done nothing, people are waiting 2, sometimes 3 months for their initial evaluation to determine whether or not they're a flight risk, they're a danger to society, and seeing whether or not they can be released. So that's 3 months of their lives, right, being exposed in less than humane conditions in these detention facilities. So it's something we really need to urge our congressional representatives to address in terms of the detention facilities, the conditions inside, and the avenues for relief. If you have money, it's a lot easier because you can afford legal representation and you can afford to pay bond. But for those that cannot afford that, it's very difficult that they end up, being unable to fight their case. They don't have access to evidence, to witnesses, to resources, to family members that would otherwise testify on their behalf because they're very far away for where all of those resources and important pieces of evidence exist. The Orange County Justice Fund is a nonprofit organization here in Orange County that raises money to help people get out on bond that cannot qualify if they have kind of a community of support. We also try to coordinate the legal representation for those individuals as well. And unlike criminal court and criminal law, immigration law does have its own courts, but there is no government appointed attorney. And the statistics show across the board that when someone has legal representation, they have a significantly stronger chance of winning their case, regardless of the type of relief. But when you have an individual who is too poor to afford legal representation, does not speak the language, does not understand our legal processes and bureaucracy, is not able to write the appropriate motions or briefs or explanations or country conditions that they need to be able to put together a strong case, they inevitably lose. And so one of the big pushes on the advocacy level that different immigration justice groups are advocating for is to create what we call universal representation, where nobody has to represent themselves in immigration court without legal representation. Even a US citizen that was born and raised here would not be able to represent themselves in any court proceeding. So it's something that's very challenging and very difficult, and something that we want to see addressed. In addition, we with regards to the asylum seekers in this country, there have been some significant and positive, I think, changes that we've seen recently. The migrant protocol program that was in place under the Trump administration, those that were, kept in Mexico, they were not even brought for their hearing. They were ordered removed because they never showed up. There's now steps being taken to ensure that those individuals that may have a legitimate basis, right, fearing persecution in their home country because of their political opinion or nationality or their religion, or because they're a member of a social group, or because of their race, that they do have an opportunity to have their case heard. For many of these very vulnerable, poor immigrants, whether they're asylum seekers, whether they're individuals that are in detention, there is such a tremendous need, even if you have no legal knowledge, but of accompaniment, right, to really help them and support them in terms of navigating the systems, the agencies that they may need. And there's many organizations that you can connect with, so that even if you may not have any legal knowledge or capacity, there's always something that you can do on a service side in terms of accompanying, journeying, walking with those individuals. The other point that I want to make in terms of a grave injustice, and some of you may or may not be aware of this, but there are many veterans that have fought in a number of wars that were either undocumented, or because of PTSD, they might have been permanent residents, and they maybe have committed a crime. Usually it's a drug-related offense because they're trying to medicate, themselves, that have been deported. And so these are people that are often have, spouses that are US citizens, children that are US citizens. And this is something that I know various representatives from Congress have been working on. It's something that we've certainly been pushing on. And it's something that finally the Department of Veterans Affairs and Department of Homeland Security is paying attention to. They're now evaluating these cases to ensure that they're able to obtain their VA benefits, and to review the policies and procedures that are deporting our veterans, because they've obviously put their lives on the line to protect our country, and the least that we can do is to ensure that we in turn allow them to remain in the United States, especially when any violation may have occurred that is related to their service and the PTSD that they struggle and suffer from. Another class of people that are impacted by our immigration laws are people who are present in the United States, but are affected by natural disasters, civil war, strife in their home country. And so these are individuals that the government grants what's called temporary protected status. And so recently we had, a few countries have either new status afforded to them or extensions of their existing status. And so this is really important because there are so many people, fleeing their home countries and coming to the United States, and who do qualify for relief. They just are not aware of it. It's important that we're aware and we're able to identify the individuals where there is recourse available to them, that there are benefits, that there are opportunities for them to take advantage of. So Venezuela, Burma, and Haiti were the countries most recently either afforded temporary protected status. It does not give them legal status in the sense of permanent residency or U.S. citizenship, but it does allow them to, work with authorization and be able to send money back home to support, their families or the country conditions in their home that need to be rebuilt because it was damaged, by hurricanes or other natural disasters. And I think the last piece, and perhaps the most important piece, may be common knowledge for some of you, but in the immigration world, there is a significant number, millions of individuals that have been brought to the United States as children, sometimes as infants, and they have been educated by our tax-paying dollars. They've graduated, some of them at the top of their class. They continue to study and go to college, and yet our country has not seen any significant immigration reform for more than 35 years. So it's been 35 years that our laws are stuck, that they do not reflect the changes and the realities and the way in which the world operates in terms of how people meet. But specifically, I just want to focus on and talk about the young people, the young adults at this point, and some of them, are still children, that have been brought to the United States. Now, in 2012, under the Obama administration, there was an executive order signed that allowed for individuals to receive deferred action. It was called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. We call it DACA. And it's for individuals who arrived to the United States before the age of 16, have been physically present in the United States since 2007. It gives them protection from deportation and work authorization. The important piece about this is that there are millions of young people and young adults that have DACA status or are in the process of applying for DACA. DACA was something that was terminated under the Trump administration in terms of new applications. But these individuals are contributing members of our society. They work extremely hard. Many of them, if not most, have U.S. citizen children, are married to U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. They've got siblings that are U.S. citizens. Their parents may have legalized their status, and they still have no way of legalizing their status. Now, there have been a number of bills, the DREAM Act specifically, introduced in Congress over the last at least 4 or 5 sessions, really pushing to give these individuals a pathway for permanent residency and eventually U.S. citizenship. And I feel that for those of us, whether you somebody or not, have a moral obligation, to be quite honest, to advocate, to stand with these individuals and create some pressure and advocate that Congress takes action to pass laws that will allow these individuals to gain a pathway to citizenship. They're here, they're educated, we've paid for their education, and now they are working and paying taxes, or they're continuing to go to school. The United States is losing a lot of top-notch scholars and professionals because our immigration laws are so archaic and have not caught up with the times. They are so limiting to how businesses operate that we're losing people that are moving and relocating to Canada. People are reestablishing satellite offices in other parts of the world and sending their employees there because we are not at a place as a country that is welcoming of immigrants, employment-based, family-based, humanitarian-based. There has been such a cap on the types and ability for people to legalize their status. Even those that have options are waiting 18, sometimes 21 years or more for them to be able to legalize their status. So people wonder, well, why don't they just apply? Why don't they just get their citizenship? Well, for many of them, they have and they are. The unfortunate reality, because of the quotas and the ancient backlogs and things that have been put into place many, many years ago, it it pretty much prohibits individuals from being able to legalize their status. So I think it's important that we, try and advocate and push for positive immigration reform. I want to talk just very briefly about just a few key propositions that exist in Congress and bills. There's the American Dream and Promise Act and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. These pieces of legislation have passed the House of Representatives, are now pending in the Senate. And I do feel it is our obligation to encourage our senators to vote in favor of these bills. The American Dream and Promise Act would address the DACA recipients, the young people that have been here, like I mentioned, for a number of years, that have been educated in our education system, to be able to legalize their status. It gives them a pathway to permanent residency and eventually U.S. citizenship. And then the Farm Workforce Modernization Act is going to ensure that the U.S. Has individuals that work in our farms, that work in our fields, that they've got legal status as well. There are so many agricultural workers that are undocumented, and they're the ones that are doing the back baking painful labor in the fields with the pesticides that often suffer various diseases and ailments afterwards. It is time for us to do justice to our farm workers in this country and allow them to seek certified agricultural worker status that would allow them to be able to work here in the United States. And after a certain period of time, they would be eligible for permanent residency. And it also allows for the temporary workers. There are many people that want to come for employment reasons, for economic reasons. They don't necessarily want to stay. They don't want to burden our systems or our Social Security or anything like that. They want to come and do the work and they want to go. And there's plenty of agricultural seasonal work that is readily available if we could just come up with a decent program that would allow those individuals to come and go seasonally as they wish. And then the last thing that I would mention is the DREAM Act of 2021. So this is something that was introduced in the Senate. The DREAM Act has been introduced, I don't even know how many times, 4 or 5 times now. And it's similar to the American Dream and Promise Act, but it at least gives a way for these young people, the young adults that came as children, to be able to legalize their status again, to be able to get their permanent residency and a pathway to US citizenship. For me, it's a no-brainer because we've already invested so much in these kids and these youth. My hope and my prayer is that we can get bipartisan support to support these individuals. Suggestions in terms of how you might be able to make a difference, to get involved. And I'm sure, the sisters have their suggestions as well, is, connect with a nonprofit organization that is doing this work, such as Catholic Charities and World Relief, the Orange County Justice Fund. Find out more, educate yourself, join an advocacy committee if you want to hear more in detail in terms of the stories and the issues that are really impacting, individuals. And something I think also that kind of came as a surprise to me, and this is what I've been doing for 21 years. It was interesting because of the pandemic, there's this completely different, unique situation that we find ourselves in with our immigrant communities that did not qualify for stimulus funds, that were really strapped for basic needs like food and shelter during the pandemic, and continue to struggle. And we know that there are resources, out there to support nonprofits and, kind of fundamental basic needs and things like housing and food. But it is a population that lives in the shadows. And sometimes these resources require legal status in order for them to access even the benefits through the nonprofits. And so we found an increased number of homelessness amongst the undocumented population, or those that are, in the detainee population as well, those that have been released. So they got released on bond or on their own recognizance, and then they had no place to go because they were detained for so long, for 3 months, without paying their rent. They lost their apartment and everything that it contained. To me, it's an unnecessary treatment and approach that we can find a better way, a better avenue of dealing with. And I'm not a proponent of, just to be clear, because I know this is a heated of no borders and let's welcome everybody. And I'm not at all advocating for that, but I think we need sound immigration reform, sound immigration policies that's going to allow everybody the due process that our country guarantees to every individual, for them to have their case heard, and for them to be able to seek the benefits that they may legally be entitled to. So I'm not saying we need to have a blanket, amnesty, or let everybody come in, but at least let those that qualify under our laws have a legitimate opportunity to pursue justice. So thank you very much for your time.